And welcome in to another edition of From Beyond Champaign. I'm Cody. You can follow me on all the socials at Cody_CHGO. And we are now finally doing the Illini therapy session after a brutal loss to Nebraska. But tonight or today, this morning, this afternoon, it is 12:15 p.m. But this afternoon, we got one of my favorite Illini Twitter accounts, Luke, who runs the Illini Breakdown Twitter account. Great analysis, great live tweets, good stuff. Luke, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. So we didn't even really do a breakdown. We just talked for the last 15 minutes about just a bunch of stuff that had nothing to do with the show. But I really just like when I do these, I just like it to be more like a conversation. Just the good, the bad, the how are we going to make ourselves feel better moving forward, and just all of that stuff. So, I guess to start, Illinois lost 80-74 against Nebraska at Nebraska yesterday. I don't even know where to rank this one in terms of worst losses this year. And I don't really know how to feel at this point. So I'm going to start with you, man. How are you feeling after this loss, about, 12 hours later?
I can't say that I'm feeling better than I was last night after the game. I felt like, especially kind of when we got to overtime, didn't really seem like there was a real plan. I don't know how you feel, but it seemed like kind of there towards the end, we were just chucking shots. I mean, we finished 10 for 42 from three. I think that's the definition of chucking shots. It was like it was an AAU game at some points. I felt like,
yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry, I don't know. It just, I mean, you got losses to some of these teams like USC and a game against Northwestern that you shouldn't have dropped on the road, and then Nebraska, they're 3-7 now in conference. I get it's on the road, and I get you're missing Tommy, but just kind of an inexcusable loss to especially with how this season started.
Yeah. For me, it's like if you look at the stat sheet, like the stat sheet alone just explains why they lost and why they should have won at the same time, because Nebraska shot like 39%. So like anyone who's saying that, like Tommy's, defense is missed. Like I think some of those like communication, especially on those inbounds plays that Nebraska got a few easy layups or dunks, like that was like maybe if he's out there, things go differently. I think just overall communication-wise on defense, him being out there makes them better defensively. But Nebraska still shot like 39%, but you shot 35%. And it's bad. And I think I'm reaching a point of reality of like, maybe this team just isn't a good shooting team, but like on one random day, they'll shoot 50%. Like everyone has every dog gets their bone, right? Like maybe they're just not a good shooting team. But the thing is, at the same time, like this team's too talented to be living and dying by the three. I understand why they jacked up 42 threes. Nebraska allows, like they're in the 300s ranked in terms of 3-pointers allowed. Like they want you to shoot threes because they'd rather you shoot threes than take twos. And math wise, like I don't see like how that's a good game plan, but whenever you're going up against the second to last 3-point team in college basketball or in the Big Ten, I guess it's a good game plan. I don't know how to feel, man. I think I'm just coming back. Every game I'm coming more and more back to reality of how I felt coming into the year, which was just, if these certain players play well, they can maybe get hot and maybe make a Sweet 16 run. But, just 3 weeks ago, a lot of us were dreaming about a Final Four national title. And I think the national media played a big part in spinning that narrative a little bit. So I don't think they're frauds like a lot of trolls have been telling me the last couple weeks, but I just think we're experiencing reality right now.
Yeah, for sure. I think, well, this team is young, right? And they're missing a starter, and Perez picks up a couple early fouls, and that obviously affects your game plan. One thing that you mentioned about Nebraska being like allowing a lot of threes and everything, I saw a stat from Piper. Shout out Derek Piper. Illinois takes the most threes in the country, or at least they're close to taking the most threes in the country, and I think our percentage is, I think it's like 300 out of 355. And so yeah, it's certainly, there are times where I think I tweeted it last night. You have to figure out how to win whenever shots aren't falling, and Nebraska game plan for them taking a lot of threes because they didn't allow anything inside. Like it felt like it was incredibly difficult for them to get to the rim, and so I don't know. I think you're right though. I think you do have to reset expectations on what this season is going to be. Ken Palm, whether you're a believer in it or not, I think after we beat Oregon, we were favored in all of one but our remaining games. I thought that was pretty unrealistic at the time, and the national media certainly took and ran with it. I think Lenardi called us. He's like, the path for a 1 seed is there. It's right there, and the next day we dropped the game to USC. So yeah. I think it's just about coming back to down to earth and recentering. And yeah, this team's not going to win the Big Ten. I mean, obviously they could make a run in the Big Ten tournament and everything, but yeah. I think this team's seed range, I think we're thinking more in the 6 to 10 range. And if it continues to trend downwards, maybe even worse than that, hopefully not. I'm not a bracketology or expert by any means, but I think on their best day, they can play with anybody. And obviously we've seen how they play on their worst days. So it makes me very nervous knowing that we have Duke next month on national TV in Madison Square Garden. So we'll see.
I think most people who have any optimism left are thinking that they're a better shooting team than they are. And when you see them make 16 threes against Oregon, it's like, sure. But I do think there's some things that they're doing that they're not helping themselves in terms of, reaching that ceiling or, just playing at a level that they should. I mean, some of the turnovers they had last night, dude, was so bad. I'm thinking about the one, I think they had a chance to cut it to 1 or 2 possessions, and KJ just literally lost the ball at the top of the key, and it led to a Nebraska layup that pushed it back to like 9 or 11 points. Early second half, that first 10 minutes, somewhere in that range. Like, it was like turnovers like that. There was one where they were trying to reverse it, KJ to Jake Davis, and Jake Davis just like let the ball go out of bounds. Like it was almost like he was trying to move the ball to the corner before he actually had the ball. And because of that, he didn't catch it and it went out of bounds. And it's just like unforced bad turnovers. And like, you just can't do that on the road against anyone. And if there's anything that I get worried about with Brad Underwood as the coach, and I don't know if this is a Brad thing or not, but like, dude, I just feel like every year we're talking about turnovers with this team every year. And as you probably know, like, I'm a big Brad guy. I'll defend him to the end. But dude, like, this team sometimes they just have these moments or these stretches where they turn the ball over 2, 3, 4 straight possessions, and you just hurt yourself. If they wouldn't have turned the ball over 17 times yesterday, shot 10 for 42 from 3, and rebounded the way they did, they probably still win the game because they didn't give away all those turnovers. Like, at least that's how I feel about it. I understand why they shot as many threes as they did, but you can't turn it over 17 times on the road, and you can't turn it over as many times you did against that team. Maybe I should respect Nebraska a little bit more. I think Fred Hoiberg's a good college basketball coach. They were a decent team last year. Obviously, they don't have the same team as last year with Tominaga gone and Rank being out, but they had lost 6 in a row coming in this game, and it's just demoralizing. Like, if you were going to finish top 5 in the Big Ten, you got to win games like yesterday's, Like losing this game and USC, probably your two biggest losses, in my opinion, in conference. I think Maryland is good, but to lose the way they did against Maryland at home is embarrassing and unacceptable. Is it better that they lost, or would it be a better loss if they lost by 7 to Maryland at home than 21? I guess a loss is a loss, though. You know, that's just where I'm at right now. It's just unacceptable what we're seeing right now. And 5-4 in January, I asked for 6-3. I asked for 6-3. I was optimistic about 7-2, and after the Oregon game and the Penn State game, I was like, yeah, we can do this.
Yeah,
and
sure.
and then they end up going 5-4 in January, and then historically Brad's teams in January have been really good, or they start to turn that corner, but it just, I don't know. KJ missing a couple games now. Tommy's out, and no one knows when he's going to be back, but they have too much talent for me to be using that excuse,
Yeah, I think the one thing that's been super disappointing to me, and you touched on it, is the KJ turnovers.
Mm-hmm.
I think we got a wake up call at the beginning of the year when they played Ole Miss. He was obviously it's his first game in the States and everything, and I get that. But like the turnovers were very evident then, and you're like, okay, well he's 18, and the season just started. Let's see how it goes. And I feel like we're here in January, almost February, and it's still a major concern.
Mm-hmm.
You can't turn the ball over 17 times on the road and expect to win. It's a miracle they put it to overtime, in my opinion. Like without a Will Riley heater, we're sitting here like wondering where we're like even worse than we are already feeling right now, in my opinion. So, and the Brad stuff, and I'm right there with you. I am not gonna trash Brad a ton. Obviously, he's stubborn and he's hard headed. We all obviously make jokes, and the rest of the conference does too, at our expense of in-game adjustments and all that stuff. And I think a lot of his teams, his better teams, just have the best player on the court. And whenever they need a bucket, and it's Terrence Shannon, it's Io, it's Kofi, it's whoever, right? But here's the thing, and I know I'm gonna sound like an apologist here, but I was thinking about this before I hopped on here, and I was talking to one of my buddies that's a big Indiana fan. He said he would kill to be where we are at right now. He's like, we haven't sniffed a Big Ten championship since Tom Crean. And he's like, obviously Brad has his flaws, and I'm not trying to dismiss that, but our floor now is the tournament, whereas in the John Gross era, we were hoping for that. Like that's all we wanted, was to make the tournament every year. And now that that's the floor, I know you just can't sit there and be happy that, oh great, we make the tournament and everything, but just kind of keep that in perspective. Like he's been an amazing coach for Illinois, and building it to what it is now. So bad losses are hard to swallow. I get that. I was more ticked off last night than anybody else. But it's just, I think it goes back to what we were saying. You got to kind of reshape your expectations and figure out where we're going to go from here. And maybe, who knows, maybe make them run in March. Because if they're making their shots, they're hard to beat. I always kind of, my personal barometer at the beginning of each game is, all right, let's see if Ben's first three goes in. It's probably going to be a good day, minus the Michigan State game, obviously. But I think when he's shooting well and he's playing confident, it kind of spreads to the team. You could tell last night that none of them were super confident in their shots, and it was evident shooting 23% from three.
Yeah.
I think you just kind of have to get those guys going, but you have to have a backup plan if they're not making threes, because it was very clear last night that there was no backup plan. So
yeah, I think the stuff you're saying about Brad, like, while it annoys me, I also acknowledge that like the standard at Illinois has skyrocketed so high now, and like, in many ways, like, I'm happy that people are pissed and people are ready to put Brad on a rocket ship headed straight for the sun. Like, in many ways, like, I get it, and I'm happy because the standard is where the standard has, but the standard is where it's at because of Brad. We put guys' names in the rafters because of Brad. you know, like, so I just think there needs to be more balance. I said that a little bit on the last show I did, but I think my biggest complaint with Brad from last night's game for sure is, I think it was a big thing on the line I Twittered too, was, taking Drake Lawhorn out entering overtime after how he kind of helped them get to where they were. Plus he had 15 points off the bench, and Ben Humrickhouse had 1 point and went 1 for 8,
Yeah.
Like
why that was my biggest one of my biggest takeaways after last night was Dre hit one of the biggest shots of his Illinois career to tie the game. And you immediately take him out and put Ben in, who had been ice cold the entire game. Didn't make a single field goal. His 1 point was from a free throw, obviously. So I just don't see the logic of putting a guy in that's 0 for 7 from 3 when Dre was having such a good game.
Yeah.
I get it. That's the length and the shooting and everything, but I think you gotta play the hot hand in that situation.
I think, the problem there more so is you can tell how much confidence Brad has in Kerry Booth. And, like even if you could have gone with Jake Davis, I guess, perhaps in that spot and somehow have Dre Gibbs Lawhorn still out there. You look at Kasparas' line, 18 points, 13 rebounds, and 4 assists. And you're like, that's a great game. He had 6 turnovers. But I honestly, like, with my eyes, I was like, dude, like, they're almost playing better without him out there. And at certain points, especially in that second half when they made the run. And I don't know, Dre Gibbs Lawhorn was a big part of their run, especially to force overtime. That big 3 he hit before regulation ended. Like, I don't know. It's just... If there's been any consistency from this team, it's been from DGL. He's been awesome in Big Ten play. This isn't just a one game like, oh, can we get more of this? No, he's been doing this in all month of January. So I think Brad needs to recognize that he needs to play more. I'm not saying he needs to start, but he definitely has got to play more. And he's one of the few guys who are hitting shots,
Yeah, for sure. I think another thing that we need to keep in perspective here is I think a lot of the narrative this offseason and at least a lot of the chatter and the things that I read in various Illini spaces was this team it's a building year for next year's team, because obviously restart basically from the ground up. Your only returning guys are Dre and Ty, and Ty isn't even playing this year. So really you just have Dre. And so they go out and they add a bunch of multi-year guys and then sprinkle it in with the young talent that is presumably not going to be here next year. We don't know for sure, obviously, but I think their youth is very evident in a lot of things, a lot of mental mistakes. Like, we got backdoor cut to death last night. I feel like they ate us alive in those situations. And then simple things like not being able to inbound the ball. I think that obviously hurts you in the last seconds of the second half, where they're chucking a Will Riley 3. Like, it almost went in, granted, but like that, I was yelling at my TV last night, like, why is that the shot? Like, why is that the shot whenever we had all the momentum? And I think I read a comment that said he knew if it went to overtime, you're going to lose. And I kind of had that same feeling. So it's just very frustrating. The youthfulness of this team often comes out. And I think that's where a reason for that inconsistency that we're talking about.
Weirdly enough, I actually felt good about going to overtime, because I felt like, in a way, in my head, I spend it as Nebraska just blew it and they had lost 6 in a row and maybe they were deflated a little bit. And I thought because of DGL and Kasparas had a couple shots, and I don't know, their defense like really picked it up too, in terms of getting out in transition off defensive rebounding and getting some easy baskets. I just thought maybe Nebraska was just tired. It's not like Bryce Williams was owning you and then he started owning you in overtime. Like, I think that's another thing. If I'm going to give Nebraska any credit at all, it's like Bryce Williams hit some tough shots. The other guy that I'm trying to think, I want to say it was Gary. No, or Worcester. No, it's Worcester. I mean, they let him shoot as many threes as he wanted to shoot, and he just couldn't make any. Like, they were sagging off him so much, and of course he steps in on one of those, like, just right at, not at the free throw line, but maybe a couple feet in front of it, and he hits a shot. Like any of the shots that he would have hit last night would have felt like daggers because he just didn't do anything for them. And like that, in many ways, it just felt like Nebraska was trying to give you the game, and then they just didn't take it. They're like, nah, we want to lose the game. That's what it felt like in my eyes.
I kind of got that feeling the whole game, to be honest with you. Like as poorly as we shot, I feel like Nebraska also shot. I mean, they shot 39% from the field, and this game could have been way worse if they would have been hitting shots. The reason I didn't particularly feel good going into overtime was they controlled most of the as badly as they shot, they still controlled the whole game, it felt like. And I don't know if this is a hot take or not. Nebraska has a pretty strong home court advantage. I feel like their fan base is so strong in every sport that it's one of the more underrated basketball venues, in my opinion. And I think that showed last night. So that's kind of why I didn't feel. I mean, anytime you go into overtime on the road, especially after missing that shot to win the game, that it was bad vibes for me. And then their leadership on that, got to give them credit. Their leaders stepped up and made plays when they had to, and Hoiberg coached a really good game. I think he is one of the more underrated coaches in the country from an X's and O's perspective, and it's hard telling where he would be right now if he didn't take that stint in the NBA.
Well, I thought he was always pretty good at Iowa State too, and that's how he got the job with the Bulls. But yeah, I mean, I've always thought that he is a good coach, and it was just going to take some time for him at Nebraska. But yeah. So go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're totally fine. That's pretty much, I mean, there's a lot of things, obviously hindsight is 2020. But I think if I was Brad going forward, just have to take it one game at a time. I know it's the most cliche thing to say, but that you really can't focus on these things. You have to learn from them and get better and everything, and make adjustments as you go. But if I'm him, I think Ben's minutes need to come down. DGL's minutes need to go up, and try to figure out that Kasparas turnover thing, because it's killing him. But I'm not going to go as far to say, I read so many comments last night saying there's no way that Kasparas is a lottery pick. He might not even be a first rounder. I'm like, that's just total nonsense. Like, NBA scouts don't care about one random game in the middle or the end of January. Like, they see the traits, and that's because that's what the NBA draft is, right? It's traits and it's potential. And the dude's 18 years old, and he's a 6-point guard that can shoot threes and distribute the ball. So he's for sure going to be a first rounder, most likely a lottery pick. So I think emotions were just running hot, but just take it for what it is, and try to enjoy the good spots where we can get them the rest of the year, as frustrating as they can be at times.
Yeah. We have some comments. I want to get to them, but before we do that, I wanted to mention, you know who Mike Carpenter is, right?
Yeah.
So big fan of him. I listen to his show a lot. He's been on here with me, so this isn't anything against him, but he tweeted last night about how, like, Brad's press conference, like post-game press conference, and talking about how we need to get whole again, and basically in a way kind of blaming the fact that they didn't have Tommy on why they lost. At least that's how the tweet was kind of shaped. And when I read it, and then I went and listened to it, and like, I didn't feel like he was blaming that. It was just, I think he was explaining what Tommy brings to their team. And the one thing that I got from it is that, because I think it might have been Derek Piper who asked him about how they end up in isolation mode way too much, or how they did a lot in that particular game. And that's where I can sit here and say, yeah, that's probably why they miss Tommy so much, because they find themselves in isolation, and you got Kasparas taking step back threes and trying to do things off the dribble and do too much and this and that. And if you want to talk about why they miss Tommy, in my eyes, it's definitely that 2-man game with Kasparas. And we can sit here and talk about talent. We can sit here and talk about expectations, all that. But I do think when you go into a season and you are building a team shaped around how you view that you can play, if you miss a piece, you're not going to be running like a well-oiled machine all the time. Now, I'm not saying, like, I'm not even making an excuse for Brad. Like, they got, with Tommy out, they got to find a way to play without him. Like, they just have to. And but at the same time, him not being able to be on the court is definitely staggering their offense. And in some shape or form, they have to figure out how to change that moving forward. That's probably my biggest takeaway. So again, this isn't like slander at Mike. Like, I just feel like Brad was just being honest. And also I feel like he has been accountable. Like, he was saying that he just wasn't being accountable in post game in his tweet. And I mean, he openly said after the Northwestern game that, like, it was his fault they lost. I'm pretty sure he said something along the same lines after the Tennessee game. And when he does that, people just kind of like shrug and they kind of roll their eyes, and it's like, well, it's nice of you to say it now. But then when he doesn't do it, it's like, hold yourself accountable. And it's like, we're all mad, man. Like, I get it, but I think that of many things of why I like Brad. One of the reasons I like Brad is that he adapts, and he will say that, that he messed up here or he messed up there, like, he has done that before. So I don't know. Mike never replied back to me, but I was, that was just something that I was just like, I don't get where you're seeing that, Mike, but that's one of the few things on Illini Twitter last night that I saw that I was like, I don't necessarily agree with that, but I understand why we're all upset, man.
Yeah, I mean, tensions flare high. Illini fans are super passionate, and that's one of the reasons I love this fan base and this school. But I think what you mentioned earlier about the two-man game between Kasparas and Tommy, obviously that's huge, because they really have a connection. They've built a connection that you see him and Merez, and it's just not quite the same. I feel like Tommy has obviously a very different skill set from Merez, and running that two-man game with him just doesn't produce the same. So we obviously need to get Tommy back, get him healthy, but it's hard to say whether or not he's going to be 100% the rest of the year, just because of the setback you face from not playing in games and being in practice. Like, even from a conditioning standpoint, like, Fletch is obviously the best in the biz, but he's not a miracle worker. The human body takes time to get back used to those things. So just figuring out how we're going to get back to that point. And I think the dustness needs to settle for a little bit longer, and just move on and see where we go from there.
Yeah. All right. We're about a half hour in. Let's get to some of these comments. I don't think I've said this at all, but if you're here and you haven't liked the video on YouTube, please like the video. And if you're new here, because maybe Luke brought you here, hit the subscribe button. Would appreciate any subs. Doing Illini content usually after games, but when you play that bad, you don't get to be talked about until the day after. That's just the way I looked at it today or last night. Jay says, who's here all the time, says, got to take the good and the bad with this team, just like Underwood. Great recruiter, not a great X and O coach. Bad in-game adjuster. Why can't they set screens off the ball and get someone open? I feel like I've read this comment 1,000 times from 1,000 different people. Mm-hmm. I think in-game adjuster, no doubt. Like, you can certainly criticize there. I won't disagree there. When are Illini fans just going to, like, kind of blame the players though?
I don't know if they will. To be honest with you,
as someone who it's so crazy. As someone who covers baseball for a living, and I have to defend Cubs players a lot, it's like the opposite with Illinois. It's like we have to blame Brad for everything. Why can't they set screens off the ball and get someone open? I don't know. Maybe the players should just do it. You know, like that's where I'm at, man. Like I just think this team's underperforming. Like, sure, maybe they could change. Like I said, they need to change things up without Tommy. They can't play the same way without Tommy. Like, do something different, no doubt. I will meet you. I will meet everyone halfway on that. But if we're talking about setting screens off the ball and like doing the little things in that, like sometimes the players just got to show up, man. Benham Rickhouse, 1 of 8. He made one. He had 1 point because he missed a free throw too. Like, dude. No, Tommy, you have to show up, dude. Should I blame Brad for recruiting him instead? Like, I guess he's also been good recruiting. He's been good in the transfer portal. We gave him all the credit last year for bringing in Marcus Domask. You know, like, is Ben Humrickhouse been a massive disappointment? I wouldn't say he's been a massive disappointment. You just don't know which version of him you're going to get. So it's just been inconsistent.
I know.
I don't know, man.
I was surprised. I didn't going into the season. I mean, I think everyone made that obvious comparison that it was going to be Ben was going to be a taller, bigger Marcus.
Yeah,
and that clearly hasn't been the case because Ben primarily just hunts his shot, like he's just a spot up shooter, and he doesn't really back people down. He's not doing the trademark booty ball that we saw last year.
Yeah,
and I was texting my friends last night like. I'm not a basketball guru, but like, why are we not at least like exploring that a little bit more of getting back to the basket, especially when you're missing Tommy? Like, you got to have some kind of inside presence there.
I feel like they also just like whether I should probably put more blame on Ben for that. Like, it's not like they're running set plays in the half court going to him either. Like, he just runs to the corner and they pass it around and KJ pick and roll. Nothing happens. KJ step back 3 before the shot clock runs out, right? Like, I feel like even a few more, like, just do a few more set plays for him in the back of the basket. Like, they did that for Will Riley yesterday at the high post. Like, why can't we do that with Ben early in the game to get him going? You know, like, you want me to put some blame on Brad for that? Sure. You know, give him the opportunity, put him in position to be in position to have success. I don't know. Sorry.
No, yeah, it's totally fine and justified. I think my take on it is it's easy to blame Brad. It's easy to blame the coach. Ask any fan base what the most annoying thing about being a fan of that team is, and they'll immediately say, "Oh, such and such coach does this every time. He can't do this, and he does." No coach is gonna be perfect. Look at UConn this year. I think it's safe to say that they're not exactly performing to expectations, being a back-to-back national champion. Like,
right.
And so I don't know. It's easy to blame Brad for things, and trust me, I do it all the time. In conversations I have with my friends and former roommates and everything, like, Brad's not doing this, Brad's not doing that is exactly the first thing that comes out of my mouth. So I totally get it. Yeah. But at some point you have to, like you said, look at how the players are executing, because they just couldn't hit shots last night. They shot it 42 times and the ball was just not, it was going in. A lot of them, yes, they were chucked and they were bad shots, and
especially in the last 90 seconds of overtime.
Right. And then, but other times, if they'd hit those shots, you wouldn't be saying this. Like, I don't think the scheme is necessarily the issue, because they were getting open shots. They just players were not hitting them.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's plenty of blame to go around, but Brad for the players not executing, like, that's not really on him. He'll tell you what's on him. He does it after every press conference.
Yeah.
So, or after every game in his press conference. Sorry, but
yeah, no, I hear what you're saying. And Jay, you're here all the time, and I appreciate. I'm not even really trying to attack you, man. It's just more of like, I'm just bringing up a perspective. Like, I think at some point players need more blame, dude. Especially in this NIL era where we're paying guys. Like, I tried really hard not to blame guys as much whenever, NIL wasn't a thing, but we were in this era where it's basically professional sports now, and I'm not going to dog a guy too much, but at the same time, I think there has to be more of a balance. He says this team is what it is. Bad 3-point shooting team, streaky at best. They have no inside play. 280 28% in 3-point percentage. It's February. It's not December. Team is what it is. I mean, yeah. Jay's just going off in the chat to start the show here. Whenever these comments have been here, he's just going off. And like, I'm totally with you on that, Jay. Like, I do feel like this team just is what it is right now, unless things drastically change in February. They fought all the way back in this disaster of a game, get the ball tied with 20 seconds left, and could barely get the ball inbounds and got a terrible shot off. Luke, you pointed that out. The Will Riley 3-pointer. Yeah. He also felt like the game was over when it didn't go in. So, yeah, the last 30 seconds of regulation was confusing. And then the not be able to get the ball inbounds was frustrating because we've seen games where they've kind of like did well in that aspect. So I don't know, but it's one of those things that on the road under pressure, there's something that's not clicking for guys. And I don't know what to really, how to explain it from my perspective, man.
Here's the frustrating thing for me that I was just thinking of, going into this season, everyone talked about, and then Brad especially talked about the strength of schedule, or the teams that we're going to be playing. This team's going to be battle tested by the time we get to conference play. And I just don't think that's super evident right now. I think when you get battle tested is when you're playing that end of December and middle of January schedule, and you're in these hostile environments. And a lot of those, like the game against Arkansas, that's a neutral site game. Alabama, I guess technically is a neutral site game, but there's in Birmingham, so like whatever you want to call it.
It's a road game, in my opinion.
Everything, and Mizzou, neutral site game in the true sense of the word, because it's pretty much halfway between Champaign and Columbia. It's so, I think that's why a lot of these home and homes are so important. And this year Tennessee happened to come to Champaign, whether or not that was a good thing, I guess, because we played there last year. I think this team definitely needed some more road experience. The Ole Miss game, I think that's kind of where that came from. But I don't know, just a lot of frustrating mistakes and a lot of youthfulness that you would think would have been improved by now, but it's still obviously there.
Yeah, I've mentioned this before. I think if not last episode, but maybe the episode before, after they lost to Maryland. As a guy who covers the Cubs full time, Theo Epstein once said, I don't remember when he said it or how he said it or where he said it, but it's a quote that I always have to use in my full-time job, where he says that, when we're talking about development and talking about young players, and, in this time period, he's talking about Chris Bryant, Addison Russell, Anthony Rizzo, and Kyle Schwarber, and all those guys from their core and 6 team. But he talks about how development isn't always linear. Like, you're not always just going to go up in development. And so I have to use that thought process with this Illini team. And I feel like I was doing a really good job of it until they went to Oregon and won by 90, and like, I was just like trying to hold back any true concern or worry and just kind of ride the roller coaster the easiest way I possibly could. Because, that loss against Tennessee was frustrating. And, that loss at Northwestern was frustrating. But it was early. You're young, like you said, how we have said all season. Inexperience, lack of continuity. You had 14 of the 15 guys on the roster are new outside of Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn, and Ty Rogers redshirted, right? So, like, you had all those things to kind of lean back on and try to remind yourself that, like, this team is going to take a while to gel. And then they win like they did at Oregon. You go to Washington, KJ saved you, but you won. And then you beat Penn State without KJ by 90, right? You start January 3-0. You got the national media start talking big on Illinois, how they could be a Final Four contender, this and that. And then the USC game happened. you went to Indiana, and I guess Indiana just looks way more dysfunctional than you at this point. If you want to feel better about Illinois, even today, you can just say, well, at least we're not Indiana, right? We're probably going to get pounded by Purdue tonight, right? But even though you won that game, you went to Michigan State, and sure, I can sit here and say Kasparas playing 9 minutes because of the refs. Yeah, sure, that I can use that as an excuse, but they also shot like 20% from three. They missed 10 free throws, right? Like they had their own play, their own reasoning of why that lost that game. They had their own faults. But then you didn't respond against Maryland after that. You beat Northwestern because you're just better than them, and probably you were like, we should have won the game in Evanston. And I thought maybe, just maybe after that win, maybe they would turn the corner. But to have a letdown last night, it brings me back to what I'm saying, that development isn't always linear. And at this point, winning the Big Ten is unfortunately out of question, which whatever. Did I feel like they're going to win the Big Ten this year? No. Did I think they could finish in the top 5? Yes. Maybe that's where I'm at, where I was at the beginning of the season. Like that's just where I'm at. Development isn't always linear. We hope that the development of this team hits its peak at the right time. And I understand everyone's frustration, all of this, because the standard is where they've put the standard. And it's just like, I'm with you. That's why I'm pissed about the Michigan State game still, because I want to win the Big Ten. That's why I'm still pissed about the USC game, because I want to win the Big Ten. But we are in reality now. And it's like, is development going to start peaking up? Is this team going to turn the corner? History says that they will, outside of maybe 2022 and 2023 season. But that team, I still don't think this team is like that, because that team, I just don't think liked playing together. I think this team likes playing together, and I think that Brad has the type of guys that he wants on his team. They just need to play better, man. Like that, to me, that's just what the players. Brad has his flaws. He's got to be a better coach in certain aspects of the game, but the players simply have to play better. Will Riley, one of the highest ranked recruits, highest ranked recruit since D Brown. He's had 2 games in Big Ten play where I'm like, okay, can we get more of that? Can you play like you're supposed to? It's nice of him to show up last night. Can you do it against Ohio State on Sunday and maybe in the entire month of February like you're supposed to,
Yeah.
I just, at the end of the day, like, the players have to perform if they're going to, if the development that I'm talking about is going to get to where I think we all hope it does. So will it? I don't know, because this team is Jekyll and Hyde, man. Like they're either bad or good. There's no middle ground.
That point exactly is why last night those thoughts of the 2022-2023 team were creeping in my mind, because that's exactly how it felt watching them. But I do agree with you. That team seemed like they hated each other at some points. Maybe hate's a strong word, but they certainly were not as close knit as this team is. I mean, this team seems a lot closer than I would have expected them to be, with them all being brand new. So I don't know. There are certain things that I have questions on. One of those being Will Riley. Yeah, he can get on a heater like he did last night, but he's inconsistent. And it seems like a lot of times he is trying to be like a playmaker and create his own shot and everything. But like, to me, like as he projects to the next level, he kind of seems more of like one of those guys that is like a 3-and-D almost, like where you use action to get him open because he's such a good shooter. Instead of him trying to create for everybody else around him, why not just get him into actions to put him in a better position to succeed and be more of a spot up shooter? I'm not a basketball guru. I'll say that as many times as I have to. So if that doesn't make sense, then is what it is. But to me, that's just where I'm at on Will Riley. And I think you're right on development is never linear. It's never going to be exactly what you think it's going to be. You'll never be able to fully project it, but I don't know.
We could just hope, as fans, all we can really do is hope that they find a way to flip that switch, and you're getting the best that we can maybe have hoped at the beginning of the year in terms of how guys develop. Like when we go through the list of guys on this roster, like Kylan Boswell, this guy forgot how to make a three. Like the one that the ill-advised one he jacked up late in I think it might have been in overtime yesterday. Just nowhere close. I think he's a really good player, and he has brought a lot to this team defensively as a playmaker. He's obviously better when KJ is on the court than when KJ isn't on the court. But like one of the reasons Brad probably wanted him outside of the fact that they tried to recruit him beforehand is he was a great shooter at Arizona. Where has that been? Like, when is that going to change? You know, like at the end, like it comes back to what I'm saying. Like, guys just have to start hitting shots. If you've shown over the course of time that you have hit shots, then start hitting shots, right? So when Brad's saying in post game that like they need to keep shooting them, it's like, well, I don't blame him. What else? Like, you designed the team to be able to be a good shooting team. You went and got guys who shot well, who have proven that they have shot well. And Kylan Boswell just has not shot the basketball well. He is only scoring in the paint right now. Like, credit to him for getting to the paint and finding a way to make an impact in the game. But like, they need him to hit some outside shots, and he just ain't doing it. You know,
I think Alec, the guy that I run the account with on Twitter, he had a tweet last night that said, it's Kylan Boswell time, and then accredited to Kylan Boswell. Like, that's kind of just how it is sometimes. It feels like where he draws up his own number, and he'll go out there and just shoot a three out of nowhere. Especially, I think it may be the same one you're talking about. It was like not even that close, not even that far into the shot clock. He just jacked up a three without trying to get into any kind of offense, and it just makes you sit there and scratch your head and like wonder what is like the plan here, because at times there definitely isn't a plan. Another guy that I really want to see more out of, because we've seen how good he can be, is Trey White. Mm-hmm. I feel like he is the definition of streaky, because there will be times where he plays like an all conference kind of player, like at his best. Mm-hmm. But then you have nights like last night where he's 2 for 8 from the field and he gets to the line 3 times, but he's making 4 out of 6, and he ends with 8 points and everything. He did. I will say, before someone commented, he did show up on the board. He had 13 rebounds. I'll give him that. That's effort. But the offensive side, you got to have more from him, especially because that's a guy where you bring him in and he's slotted to play over a guy like Ty, like that. You kind of, this is just my guessing. Ty kind of saw that, and they're the same kind of player, archetype at least. And then, so Ty's like, okay, I'm gonna sit and get my own stuff figured out. So if you don't have Ty, then Trey's got to bring more to the table, man, at a higher clip.
I do think he's brought more offense to Illinois, but his 3-point shooting as well has been terrible. Like, would it be any worse than Ty Rodgers just being a guy that, like, how Illinois was guarding Forster for Nebraska? Like, would it be any worse? Like, to have Ty Rodgers on the court than Trey White jacking up threes that aren't going in? You know, like, to me, I think Trey White has brought a level, an energy. He's on the rebounding, right? Like, he rebounds the basketball, and I think defensively he's solid, right? But I do think that they need more from him offensively. And when they were playing well, like, he broke out against Wisconsin, had a great game against Wisconsin. They probably should have won by double digits in that game, but they won that game. You know, he was good in December and the early part of January, I feel like. And yeah, these last handful of games, he just hadn't been there. And it doesn't help when you don't have Tommy as well, that, you know, they just need him to step up and be a force. And I do think he was aggressive early in the game yesterday, but because shots didn't fall for him, he kind of just drifted away. But yeah, he's also got to make free throws when he's got the chance. And they missed free throws last night, even though as a team they weren't terrible. They shot 12 of 18 from the free throw line. They lost by 6. So 6 missed free throws. You make them all, you're going to a second overtime, I guess. But you know, they had some missed free throws at crucial times. I feel like all the missed free throws are at times where, like, maybe you can shift the momentum a little bit, and they just didn't do it, you know? So, let's keep going here. Cindy, she definitely probably is very annoyed with our Brad Underwood apologizing. Brad is overrated. He's a top 8 paid coach, and we get nowhere near top 8 results with this guy. Stubborn as hell too.
Forgive me, Cody. Where did they end up last year in the tournament?
Yeah, they went to the Elite Eight. Yeah.
Uh, I get it. Trust me.
It's just 1 year. It's just 1 year, but yeah.
I mean, Brad is a great coach. I'm sorry, I have to disagree with you. I don't think he's overrated. You got to pay guys like that to stick around. Ask Oklahoma State. You got to pay guys like that to stick around and develop a program, and this is where he wants to be, obviously. So he's here to stay, and I'm sorry about that, but I don't think he's overrated.
I think that we've been fair about our criticisms of Brad in this episode, and also like this like zooming out of the microscope and just kind of understanding like where the program is and stuff. I just, it is what it is. Like, I don't blame people for necessarily feeling this way, considering they're not playing well right now. Now, what you're getting from the money you're paying for Brad, if this team starts playing better in February, like, are you going to have that same energy? What if they go to Madison Square Garden and beat Duke in mid-February? This team certainly has the talent to do it. I feel really good about playing Michigan State again at home. Even after this loss, I still feel pretty good about playing Michigan State again at home and winning that game. I do. I think Brad will have them ready for that game. Well, obviously they need to beat UCLA. They need to beat Ohio State this weekend. Like, it's all like Brad is getting paid in my eyes based on like when times aren't good. How does he get them? How does he turn the corner? I guess I'm looking at like the expectations for this team coming into the year and just reminding myself that. But
yeah, I mean, I kind of look at it in two facets. The first one is regular season success and postseason success. Starting with postseason, you can point to his postseason record and say that's not a top paid coach. And you know what? I guess I can see that. I could see that. But keep in mind, the NCAA tournament is incredibly hard to win in. It is one of the most difficult postseasons to win in because there's so many different factors. It just depends on your draw and how your team's coming, like how you're playing coming into it. And I don't know. That could be me being an apologist again. You can call me what you want. I totally understand. But then you look at regular season, and Illinois is. I don't know if Purdue is like caught up in terms of the amount of wins, but Illinois is at least top 2 in wins in the Big Ten in the last 5 years. Like you can't take that for granted. Like, we are consistently top of the Big Ten every year. And I get the postseason lack of success outside of last year is very frustrating. It is for all of us, but the floor is so high now. The floor is incredibly high compared to where it used to be. And I just think that we all need to when in times like this, you have to appreciate that.
Yeah.
Because if you let a guy like Brad go, you don't know what you're gonna get. You don't know what's gonna happen. So I think you just have to be appreciative. It's fair to be critical. I think that's totally fair, but you have to at least give some grace in times like this too.
Yeah. I would say that loss to Loyola a handful of years ago has
still not over.
People still are just not over it. I'm not over it.
No, yeah, for sure.
It's one of the worst losses that I have ever had to endure as a fan of all the teams that I like, and I like Chicago sports, and I have endured a lot of bad losses, man. And that one is top 4 for me.
I'm sure.
So, let's see. Robert, he says, we were talking about this a little bit earlier. DGL has to play more. We have to establish the ability to take it to the hoop and get fouls, especially when going for a game winner. Absolutely agree, man. What's KJ's net worth when he gives up 10 points on turnovers? I still think he's a lottery pick, but I think I don't know if you listen to Locked On Illini, Luke, with Sonny Verma. He was just on the show the other day. He's been kind of talking about on his show the last handful of weeks of like KJ is going to hit that like freshman wall at some point. Now, the turnover thing has been a problem all season for sure, but you can definitely see like, you can definitely see like perhaps maybe that wall is kind of hit, even though you look at his stat line last night and you're like, oh, outside of the turnovers, he had a good game, but he also, the 3-point percentage is coming, it's steadily coming down, but he's also just taking a lot of step back threes. And I don't think KJ's net worth or his draft stock has changed much at all during this stretch. I really don't think it has, because NBA scouts are looking at a lot of different things. And I'm still going to my office and telling the guys who cover the Bulls that I'm like, why can't this team start losing games so we can draft KJ?
Seriously, I think the Bulls are a whole different discussion, but yeah, they can use whatever talent they can get at this point.
Right.
But in terms of KJ and his draft stock or his net worth or whatever you want to say, I mean, I think it's still as high as it has been. I think there's still a very good chance he could end up in the top 5. And that's not me drinking the orange Kool-Aid. That comes from somebody that I spend a lot of time like reading those things and looking at draft boards and everything. He could still very well be a top 5 pick. And I have friends texting me last night that I grew up with that aren't even Illinois fans saying, holy cow, KJ's a stud. Like that's an NBA player right there. That step back, that's an NBA shot.
Yeah. The thing that I pay attention to, if you want to pick something from one game that makes you remember like just how good this guy is that drive to the basket he had in overtime. Mm-hmm. Like I think it was like one of the few baskets they made, and what they made like one or two. The one of those baskets was, I think it was in transition. He just leading the pack and just went through like 2 guys, had a Euro step layup. Like the control he has when he has the basketball is different from a lot of college basketball players. But sure, like for his biggest flaw for sure is he turns it over way too much. And
I think he can try to get cute with it a lot too.
Yeah.
Like, or he makes decisions that are just, you don't understand where he's trying to do. Like last night, he tried to get the ball into Merez, and I think he had more room than what he actually had to get that pass off, and ends up going off his hands and going out of bounds. Like just things like that, where he either tries to get too cute with it. Like, what would we be saying right now if we didn't beat Oregon by 1 million when he did that no look behind or through his legs pass to Ben? And Ben thankfully made it, but like, what would we be saying about that if that didn't go in and if we didn't win by a ton? Like just those things, like it's easy to be critical when things go bad, but I don't know.
Yeah, I hear you. All right. We've reached an hour point. I feel like this comment from Z Paulson, we can end the show on this one. Does Illinois still have the highest upside in the Big Ten? So after this loss to Nebraska, do you still feel that way? Because I still feel that way.
Absolutely. If you're looking at their ceiling, then yes, for sure. I think we've seen it on multiple occasions. It's just the floor. The floor is where you're having issues right now.
Yeah. Like I said, players have to play well too. They have to hit shots that they got. How many open shots did we see them just miss yesterday? Like DGL said it in his post game with the media yesterday. Like sometimes we have to, he was talking about offensive rebounding and being on the offensive boards and stuff, but also like we need to grow up as men and start knocking down shots we're supposed to knock down. Basically, it's essentially what he said. And I just think when you're getting wide open shots and you're missing them, it's like, okay, you're not going to make all of them, but this is D1 basketball, man. Like y'all got here for a reason, and all of you were touted as these great shooters. So start making shots.
Yeah.
Start making shots, dude. That's my thing.
I think on the other side of the ball, I think at times, I don't know how you feel. I felt at times last night the defense was kind of pathetic. I feel like there are times where,
especially those like back cuts.
Yeah, the back cuts and like just a lack of effort at sometimes. I think I said that last night, and somebody tried to come at me and say that, like, well, they got 3 kills. I don't know if you've ever played basketball, but that means 3 stops. I'm like, great. They need a lot more. They need more than 3 stops because Nebraska's hanging 80 on you. I get they went to overtime, but still, like, as a team that at one point, I don't know if they still are, they were a top 10 defensive team. You can't let a team like Nebraska, 3-7 in the Big Ten, hang 80 on you. Like at some point, you gotta, if you're not, especially if you're not making shots, you gotta step up on the defensive end.
Yeah, I'll bring up KenPom real quick. Man, it was fun to see Illinois in the top 10 of KenPom for a while, but they are now they're 18th in KenPom going into today, or at this moment, 30th in offensive efficiency and 12th in defensive efficiency. 330 in luck.
330. Oh, interesting. Okay.
So I always just pay attention to offense and defense, but like in the luck rankings, if you're 350, does that mean you're the unluckiest team? Like one of the unluckiest teams in basketball, or does that mean that you're too lucky? I think that would say that you're one of the unluckiest teams.
That makes logical sense to me. I'm not entirely sure, but
I don't know KenPom as well as a lot of people, but
right.
Yeah.
I'm curious to see what I don't know who buys into all these different things. If you don't, whatever. But we've been sticking in the top 10 of net, I know, for the longest time. And after last night, I doubt that stays true. But I mean, honestly, I think 18 in KenPom is still a little generous from how we've seen them play over the last few weeks. So I mean, that's not horrible. It could be a lot worse, but certainly we know what this team is capable of, and we should expect more. But
yeah. All right. Well, before the show, I said, 45 minutes tops, and we're at a minute. We're at 61 minutes and counting. So, Luke, thanks for joining, man. It was a good conversation. Would love to have you on again sometime.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime. It was a great time, and I hope to be back again.
You can follow him at Illini Breakdown on Twitter. Great account. Again, there's a lot of great Illini accounts out there, but I know you guys are talking about bringing the podcast back and stuff as well. So if you get to that point, for sure, make sure to check that out and all of that. So anyway, for all of you that are here, make sure to hit the like button on your way out, hit the subscribe button. This has been an hour therapy session. I hope we all feel a little bit better. Maybe we have a little bit of some, perspective. This still sucks. We have to wait until Sunday for Ohio State. At least they'll be at home. And I do like Brad Underwood teams coming off a loss. So there's my spin zone for this. And yeah, we'll see how the rest of the conference does. But until then, Ohio State coming off a huge win against Penn State on the road in their high school gym, basically. So maybe we'll get a letdown from them at the State Farm Center on Sunday. But until then, I hope you all have a good rest of your week and start of your weekend. But I'll see you on Sunday. As always, ILL.
I.